Welcome everyone to the 2020 August 19 Diagnostics Working Group meeting. We are going to go through the items flagged to the agenda, but before that, does anyone have any announcements this week? Okay, let me share my screen to share the agenda. So the first item is expand the scope of deep dive meetings. So this is a suggestion to expand the scope of the deep dive meetings, which we have every other week, to other topics besides the deep dive journeys that we were doing before. We have some items flagged to the deep dive as suggestions. And last week, we actually deep dived into one of these other topics. So this is on the agenda basically for awareness of folks that were not aware yet that we are going to start discussing other topics on those deep dives. And here's a list of topics. You can find them by searching for the deep dive agenda flag label on the repository. We still have to finish the journeys, but maybe it's good to take a break and look at other topics, especially now that we started to have some topics to discuss again. Does anyone have any concerns with us expanding the scope, or does anyone have any suggestions of topics we should be discussing, or any other suggestions about this?
I agree with the expand the scope.
Cool. Okay, so the next topic is revisit meeting frequency. So right now we have meetings every week. We alternate between the diagnostic meetings and the deep dive meetings. And the main reason we were having every other week meetings was to work on the user journeys. But since we are almost finished, I was wondering if we should get back to every other week meetings and maybe alternate between deep dives and working group meetings. I think we were doing that before we started the weekly meetings, but I'm not entirely sure. So just to make sure everyone understands, the suggestion is to start having meetings every other week, and we alternate. One week we are having the working group meetings, and the other week we have the deep dives, and then we go back to the working group meetings, and we go back and forth. And if needed, we can schedule one-off deep dives, which I think makes sense for some topics because we need to involve folks that are not regular attendees from the working group for some topics.
Yeah, so what we had before was I think this regular meeting every 2 weeks, and then the deep dive we kind of like added in the spaces between. So if we changed it to be alternating between these two every 2 weeks, then this one would only be once a month. which I'm not sure how people feel about that. We want it that infrequently. It seems like we haven't had a ton of stuff to say, but it would still be good to be able to give some updates relatively frequently. So, like, we could maybe do like this one that's like full, just update everything, and then maybe the like deep dive we could do like a quick update at the start or something. If we wanted to do it that way.
So instead of alternating every other week, we alternate in the meeting.
That's what have one that's like full update meeting like this, and another that just has like a quick sync and then deep dive. Just so like if there is anything that needs to be said in that like that 2 week point in the middle, that there is an opportunity to say it.
I like that suggestion. Anyone have any comments? And if for some reason for one meeting we have more topics, we can use most of the time for normal meetings. I think that's fine. If we stay 4 weeks without deep dives, it's probably not the worst thing. And if it's an important deep dive that week, we can always have a one-off meeting with the stakeholders. So I like that suggestion. I think it would work well for us. One thing, we should try to keep the items on the agenda relevant to what we really need to talk about. And you need to remember to remove items that are not that important anymore. I think it's not a problem for this week, but for the past few meetings, we had a lot of items that were just stalled, or yeah, mostly items that were stalled or that we should have removed. So keeping the items cleaner, I think, would help as well, to make sure that we can have those, let's say, 15 minutes at first to updates, and then rest of the time dedicate to one deep dive. I think that works.
Yeah, as long as we keep the topics fairly minimal, then it should be quick to get through. Like as it is, our meetings are generally not more than half an hour. Usually, people have like an hour blocked out in their schedule for any given meeting. So just fill that extra time with deep dives rather than just cutting off early. And if people do want to leave early, they still can, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anyone else have any suggestions on that, or any comments, or disagree with that suggestion? Okay, so I'm gonna comment on the issue, and I think we can start trying this moving forward. We just have to let Michael know so he doesn't create the deep dive meetings anymore. And if we notice that it's not working, we can come back to how we were doing. So let's give it a try and see what happens. Okay, next topic is Node.js contributor survey. Jurish added this topic, so I'm not sure if we can discuss it today. Anyone read this? Anyone have context?
Yeah, I haven't really looked too closely at it. We discussed it a bit once before, or maybe twice. I'm not sure what more there is to talk about.
Yeah, so for those not familiar with, this is the survey. It's basically, it was a survey we circulated a few months ago, I think, not entirely sure, um, about experience of development of Node.js Core. And we had some questions related to diagnostics. For example, debugging test failures, for example, which is a 50-50. A lot of people don't find it a problem. A lot of people find it very annoying, and some people find it a blocker sometimes. So I think the goal of the issue was to um, discuss these results and try to come up with anything that could be improved. I think the discussion mixed a little bit diagnostics of Node.js Core and diagnostics of Node.js applications. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure if we have anything to talk about. I think we should continue on the issue, and if it gets traction again, we can re-add to the agenda. Does that sound okay for folks?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So next item is async hooks stable API. Do you have any updates, Stephen?
Not too much, but there was the pull request I made to V8 fix Thenables. We were looking at backporting that to 12, but there was apparently some issues with Blob Watcher not passing tests. It was breaking for some reason, which it was eventually figured out that there's a memory safety issue in the 1.x version of FS events. So that just needs to be fixed. It's just a memory safety issue that is very low probability of actually running into in reality, but the test suite just happened to trigger the right things in the right order to make it happen, I guess.
Anything else?
No, that's basically it. So I think that should get backported soon. No, well, there's a backport PR. I think it should be landed soon, probably. And other than that, I haven't really seen too much async hooks progress. And I've been working on other stuff.
Okay. I think this is one of those issues that is relevant to keep on the agenda, even if we don't have many updates. unless we decide that async hooks will never be stable. But until then, I think we should keep it on the agenda.
Yeah, I'm personally of the opinion that async hooks probably shouldn't ever be stable, but I think it's worth keeping on the agenda to keep us thinking about what can we abstract async hooks with to make that question irrelevant. Hopefully, async hooks should eventually just be some internal thing that everyone forgets about.
I agree. Okay, anyone has anything else on this topic? So moving to the last one, improving automated remote connection via inspector protocol. So I added this issue to the agenda to present a demo of a command line tool I implemented that achieves most of the requirements I raised on the issue, which are no need to make changes to application code or install ISO dependencies on the fly, trigger inspector tools on already running processes, and allow to do that non-interactively. So existing tools, they achieved most of it, but none of the tools I tried achieved all of those 4 points. Usually they achieve 1 or 2. For example, usually either you get to trigger tools on a already running process, or you get to trigger non-interactively via scripts. One example is the inspector client that we ship with Node.js. It allows you to run inspector tools on already running processes, but it doesn't allow you to run non-interactively. It will always prompt for the REPL. And the idea was to come up with something that was small enough in scope that it might eventually be ported into core, but that fitted those 3 requirements. And this last one, the only way to really fit this one is by having it on core. So it all depends on if we get the tool on core or not. So I wrote a tool that achieves those 3 requirements, and I'm going to demonstrate it now. So I'm going to run a server here. It's just a Fastify server. I'm going to run autocannon to generate some load. And then there is this tool called Observe. It allows you to take heap profiles, heap snapshots, or CPU profiles, which are the 3 main diagnostic collectors that we have on Inspector. So for example, if I want to take a heap profile, I can use the heap profile tool. I can pass the process ID of the Node.js process, which let's find out first. It's probably the first one. 10.09. And we can pass a duration for like 10 seconds, like 5 seconds since it's presentation. And it's going to run for 5 seconds. And then it outputs the profile to send a route. You can also pass a location, so it writes to file instead. Writing to a sender route has, by default, allows to pipe the result to an encryption tool, to a compressor, or to send to another server. In case you want to avoid writing to a slow disk in servers. As you can see, the profile here, it doesn't capture many frames, mostly because of the frequency. It captures at a really low frequency by default, but oops. Okay. But it has an option to increase the frequency using the sampling interval, which for hip profile means after how many bytes allocated it will sample the application. By default, it's like 32 kilobytes, I think. So if we reduce to 512 bytes, it should capture a lot more frames. It should have a lot more performance spec as well. And as we can see, it generated a bigger file now. We can open Chrome DevTools. And open the memory tab to load that file. And there we go. We have a heap profile. We didn't have to make any changes to the application code. This can be run with npx, so it has to be installed somewhere. But it can be installed as a dependency of the application. And yeah, you can run other tools. So for example, we can run the CPU profile instead. And there we go. We have the timeline of execution. Just like if we attached Chrome DevTools and started recording. And we can also take snapshot. I think that's it. Oops. What was the PID? Operation. Oh. Then yeah. And you can load and you have all the objects that are in memory. So the overhead is about the same as running those tools via C++ code. It might be even less because the inspector runs on another thread. Unfortunately, because I have the DevTools open, the process stopped. So let me just close this and let me run again the application and run the autocannon. The only thing is heap snapshot has a small overhead. Oops. that is noticeable. 36. As you could see, it stopped by half a second, maybe less. Let's run again. It's a real small pause, but it's definitely noticeable if it's on a web server. So it's not a tool that is recommended for production, the heap snapshot, but the other two tools should be safe to run. And yeah, that's it too. Any questions?
No, I have a question. I am not totally sure when we start the inspector protocol, we attach to debugger, but I am not have sure if we can close it remotely.
So short answer is no. I tried a lot of workarounds to close it remotely. Let's elaborate. So when you start Inspector protocol, you have the server or the host, which is the application you are inspecting, and you have the client. You can close the client connection, but once you open the connection on the server, you can't close it unless you opened it programmatically via code on the application, which is not the goal of this tool. So yeah, once you start the connection, it will remain open. And fortunately, there's nothing to be done about it.
So the issue is when debugger is started, the overhead is growing up until we close it programmatically. That's it.
No, just open the connection doesn't incur any overhead because it runs on a separate thread and it's very lightweight. It only incurs overhead when running inspector commands. So for example, and only some commands. So for example, if you could start the connection and run runtime.enable, it should not incur any overhead. But if you run heap profile.enable followed by heap profile takes heap snapshot, that's going to incur overhead while executing the heap snapshot, but it shouldn't incur overhead before or after that.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Any other questions?
If we get this into core, and does that give it a path to be able to turn that off?
No. No, because it would still run as a separate process. So it would still connect remotely. And we can't close the connection remotely. We could probably implement something on core that allows to close the connection remotely, and that's not tied to this being added to core. But that's not something that I investigated yet. Any other questions? Suggestions? Concerns about the tool?
No, looks good to me. Is there anything in particular blocking it from like opening a PR, trying to get it into core right now?
I think before we add the APR to add to core, we need to try to move it to the foundation. And after that, we can probably try to add it to core. It already has tests. I've been trying it on production from time to time. So far, it's been fine. So yeah, I don't think there's anything blocking right now. The only thing is it has 2 dependencies, which we might need to remove before adding to core, but I'm not entirely sure. That's something that we are going to find out.
We have some other tools that have dependencies, so I don't think it'd be a huge issue.
Do you remember which tools? Because, for example, Node.js doesn't have any dependencies. They implemented their own WebSocket client to connect to the inspector protocol.
Oh, like we ship with NPM, and NPM has a whole bunch of dependencies.
That's true, yeah. That's true.
I think we had some other ones as well, but forgetting off the top of my head. I think there's something with like documentation had some dependencies.
Yeah, I was careful to add dependencies that don't provide transitive dependencies. So if you install these packages, it's only 3 packages that get installed. It's Observe, the WebSocket package, and which the other one? Commander, which is just to parse the command line tools, command line flags. So it shouldn't be a huge problem porting it to car, but I could see pushback because of the dependencies. It's still worth trying. So
Yeah, I would just try as is, and if there is any problems, then you can look at trying to remove dependencies.
I agree. Anything else? Okay, so we can finish the meeting early today. And next week, then we don't have a meeting. And after that, we have the first 15 minutes for updates and the rest of the meeting for deep dives. Just checking again, does that sound good for everyone?
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
Cool.
It's good to me.
See you in 2 weeks then. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.